From the Good Fortune Kettle. Once upon a time, there lived a poor junk man who one day found a badger caught in a trap. The old man felt sorry for the badger and straightway set it free. The grateful badger, in return, wanted to help the poor junk man. So he turned himself into a tea kettle and stealthily crawled into the basket the junk man was carrying on his back. What a surprise the poor junk dealer received when he reached home after his day's work. Deep down in his junk basket, he found a beautiful tea kettle. In all his life, he had never seen such a fine tea kettle. He decided to take it to a certain temple priest who had always been very kind to him. He knew that the priest would want to buy such an unusual kettle. Early the next morning, the junk man carried his treasure to the temple. As he expected, the priest was greatly pleased with the shining tea kettle. The priest paid him 3 whole ryo, a far greater amount of money than the junk man could ever have dreamed of getting. Amazed to have all this money, the junk man went home, hardly believing his good fortune. For a time, the priest sat admiring his beautiful tea kettle. Then he filled it with water and put it on the fire to boil. Suddenly, strange things began to happen. The tea kettle cried out, "It's hot, it's hot!" And with that, out came the badger's hairy head, 4 brown and hairy paws, and then a bushy tail. The badger kettle hopped off the hearth and began to run around and around the room. The priest was frightened. He did not intend to keep such a strange tea kettle in his temple. He sent for the junk man and handed the kettle back to him. Poor junk man, he had to carry the tea kettle home, but he did not know what to do with it. At bedtime, he placed it at the head of his bed. At midnight, a voice awakened him. He looked around and finally discovered that it was coming from the tea kettle. "Dear old man," said the badger tea kettle, "yesterday you saved my life, for I'm the badger you so kindly set free. I turned myself into a fine tea kettle, for I wanted to help you earn some money. Why don't you carry me around with you now to perform as a show? Together, we can make a great many ryo." The junk man decided to do just that. As he and the badger kettle made their rounds of the villages, people flocked to see the dancing of the strange tea kettle. To their delight, it could sing and walk a tightrope as well as dance. After many performances, the junk man was no longer poor, but rich. So wealthy indeed that he and the tea kettle decided they could stop working and retire to a life of leisure. Once more, the junk man took his tea kettle to the temple. He told his friend the priest how set free the badger he had set free had turned himself into a fine tea kettle and helped him to make a fortune. The priest was touched by the story of the faithful badger. The priest was touched by the story of the faithful badger. This time he was delighted to accept the tea kettle as a treasure to be cherished in the temple. It is said today that the tea kettle is still among the treasures of the Morinji temple in the city of Tabashi.